Hello and welcome to another Six Sages Gaming video. Today I'm joined by Max and we're going to be talking about the ice cards of Opus IV. Max, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing awesome. How's it going?
I'm very excited because as you viewers at home can see, I have this beautiful image of Ifrit that is up. So probably not after this recording goes live, but probably Friday we will have the finalized image for the mat for the community-driven and community-ran Final Fantasy event that we're doing in Florida. So of course that pre-reg link will be live. Should be Monday. There's some delays in getting the page set up, but that's all for next week. What you guys want to talk about is ice cards. So up first we have Umaro, and Max, I'm going to go ahead and let you start with the first couple cards here.
All right, wonderful. So Umaro is a kind of interesting card. It's a really weird card to kind of describe here because by itself, its stat value is great, except that its cost is 6. That puts it open to several numbers. The biggest thing. It does have a wonderful effect of searching for a monster, but I mean, outside of that, I mean, its special is really unimpressive, and you have to actually work to make it incredibly impressive, such as pairing it with the Cyan or whatever. But I can just think for much less mana, there's much more interesting things I'd want to do. So unless I'm playing some kind of crazy monster-driven deck that's also playing around ice, Umaro is a card that's just there and is interesting, but doesn't have a place yet. But Umaro does have interesting potential for the future because he does have EX burst.
Absolutely. I love that he has EX burst. He has a S, so you feel you get the full value out of running a complete playset. And again, I will agree that the monster bit does feel a little bit have an awkward spot. We just got monsters introduced. We don't know exactly how they're going to fit in. I know I said in the fire video, but some decks don't run any fire cards, or at least they didn't in the Japan meta. So I think this is a card that I'm definitely going to keep in my back pocket. But at first take, I don't see any cards really coming to in play with it.
It's worth noting, based on the art, though, that I mean, he is what is very close to dabbing, and a time before dabbing was even a thing. So, potentially speaking, the artist could see the future. What that means to Final Fantasy, I don't know, but perhaps it'll last forever.
All right, I'm gonna give a thumbs up just for that. Next, we have just a very general search card. Searches for a category 6 forward. Empire Cid. I don't really have much I want to say about that, but do you want to add anything there, Max?
This is the almighty Lord Banana Cid, and before you think I'm ridiculous, this card is insane. One interesting note about it, and again, this is going to sound ridiculous, but it has its relevance. This card is a hero and not a rare, unlike every other 3-drop tutor we've seen up to this point. Honestly, his wardrobe is doing a lot of things, and honestly, the best thing about this card, speaking seriously here, the fact that it's a 6 searcher in ice is insane. Opening negates on 6 this set kind of added a lot of potential to a lot of different colors. And honestly, like, we look at some of the other tutors we have, like we have Jesse, which tutors for 7s, and Earth. There's Vincent for sure, but like it's kind of cost limited up to that point when that card came out. Like there was not a lot to pull from. We're getting like the best of all worlds here. This is again very akin to Ico, except this is a hero, and he does have that Banana Cid outfit, so it's really impressive. Honestly, this card is definitely like a max out of max. You should pick this up. Definitely go for them foil. It's really good for anything you're wanting to do in ice that involves 6.
Absolutely, and with some of the cards we'll talk about in a little bit later, that, you know, as Max had mentioned, there is just the floodgates were opened on 6 in this set, which is awesome because I'm really looking forward to just making a 6 focused Final Fantasy 6 focused forward deck, because all the art actually matches up, so you don't have, you know, that mismatch problem that I know quite a few people, you know, either love or hate, what have you. But also the fact that, as we mentioned in the fire video, that Fire Ice Final Fantasy 6 has me really excited for the next set, and this is obviously a card that you would play 2 of. You know, 3 of if you want to be really greedy, but probably a 2 of. Moving on past that, we have Bard. Pay nice, put Bard in the break zone, choose a forward, and dull it. First off, I want to at least acknowledge that finally, I don't know what it was about this set, but Ice got to a place where it finally has a lot of valuable 2-drops. Not saying that this is necessarily going to be the best one out of the new ones that it got, but I do like the fact that it breaks itself and can just dull any forward on a whim. So I'm interested to see if this card will ultimately make the cut. I can see it certainly in some copies, and I think it's going to be insane in, you know, that kind of lightning ice deck that we covered in Opus 1, since there's a lot more of dull effects now. But where it gets past that, well, is yet to be seen.
This is a card that's kind of made for sealed or limited formats. I mean, its cost is fine. It's a 2-drop and non-unique, which is wonderful, but it doesn't really do enough to wow me. I mean, yes, you could make an extraneous play to have some rare circumstance where you can overextend to close out a game with it, but this set did add enough to the backup range, especially when you're even with the pools even so big as it is now. When we go past mono strategies, it's really hard to justify 1 of the 5 slots to this card in particular. That said, you can work hard and you can make it work. Definitely needs to be foiled though.
And then guess what? We have another Bard. So another 2-drop that we mentioned. Pay 4, put into the break zone. Your opponent discards 2 cards from his or her hand, only usable during your turn. I think the cost is probably ultimately going to be fine for you want, but I think it's the only deck that you're going to be playing this in is going to be that kind of Win Ice Cid, and now I'm going to forget the guy's last name, Cid deck where it can break a forward. You know, what we saw from Nationals, the Win Ice discard focus deck. So probably can have some room there as a way to just dump your opponent's hand, but very expensive, probably some other options that you want to be using.
Honestly speaking, this card is significantly better than the last card.
Yes.
I'm completely willing to go overboard to do some kind of crazy ditch effort to like rip my opponent's hand apart. I would get more use out of that than dulling 1 forward. It's wonderful because in some cases you really don't even care what it does. It just costs 2. It's not unique, and you just get it out there. It is a Final Fantasy Tactics card, so that does bring interesting possibilities along the way, especially as time goes forward. Really, I mean, this one's getting closer to the point of like, I could put this in a deck. I could sleeve this. It's almost there. And it really depends on what you're trying to do with ice and what your other pairing element is.
So to that point, let's kind of have a quick side discussion here. Ice did get a few more discard effects in general, and we've seen some Japan players who very much favor the mono ice strategy with a heavy discard focus. Do you think that we will continue to see discard focused decks, or do you think that with the amount of tutoring that we've gotten, or I should say searching that we've got, and some of the extra draw effects and monsters replacing themselves, that it ultimately won't be as impactful in this next set?
I mean, it's a delicate balance for sure. I mean, you literally think of it like a scale. I mean, if they put too much searching, then obviously there's a drawback to the discard thing. If they put too much discard, where do we go from there with having to balance things? With that said, there's enough strategies that you can kind of present yourself into a situation where you're not really worried about getting your hand ripped apart. You just established your board. You can hemorrhage for a few turns, take some damage, and solid up the game. I mean, obviously, the most worrisome things would be like an incredibly aggressive, rip your hand apart, like a very early game, like turn 1, turn 2, you're negging 3 cards. That's depending on the kind of deck you're playing, where you are, that's pretty terrifying.
Absolutely. Going on, we have the first monster for ice. We have Ghoul. Pay 2, choose 1 forward, and dull it. So again, for those that are not familiar with monsters, they just sit out in the field. You can use their effects. They don't have, when they're a monster themselves, you can just use the effect right away. So another way that you could read this is pay 4, dull one of your, dull a forward. It can be your own, which is worth noting if you want to play around Al Cid or something, which is an interesting note. Based on how much Al Cid sees play or doesn't see play, you could somehow add it in as kind of a tech choice for that. But I think with what Ice wants to be doing in dulling, it's probably fine. I'm not sure if I'm just running the other monsters instead, but again, I think if you want to play this deck that has a lot of dulling effects, you want to maximize on, say, Zalera, and I forget what the other backup is that we're going to call. It's pick a number, dull all of them of that number. I think there's certainly a good amount of cards that are kind of playing into this. What we'd seen in Magic is kind of death and taxes, or in this case, just the dulling of their entire field, where you're going to have to make your opponent pay extra for those effects, or make sure that they have either an Oracle and an Astrologian. Does Fairy see more play because of this? I'm very interested to see in kind of what way players build these ice decks because of the different kind of subtypes, if you will, that ice has now been more established in.
Ice has honestly just turned into the hate bearers of the set, and it's kind of getting more evident with this. Honestly speaking, to jump completely different from what he is saying, This card is the best paired card with 3-drop Ramsel from set 3. We finally have very interesting applications and uses for Final Fantasy Tactics cards. This card does everything you want in Ice, because it's just literally something that stays there. It's very difficult to interact with, and you don't have really a drawback from trying to get that dull out of it. You're not losing a land, it's just something that's there, it's not interacted with. It has its own other effects, it can combo with other monster-based effects. I mean, to kind of jump ahead though, Ice kind of got the short end of the stick with monsters this set, but again, who knows what's going to be in the next set. This one is definitely a decent one, but like I don't also know that I'd be in a position I want to sleeve it up. But also I'm kind of hesitant to like make anything that's like forcing myself to like a Ice deck that's going to be like, this is my tap deck, this is my discard deck. I definitely just do big picture things. So this card has potential. This card is actually playable. I just don't know where it actually wants to be yet.
Yep. Black Mage. A very interesting note here. Ice doesn't necessarily have a lot of ping effects. We have Cid, we have the original Shiva, which just saw literal 0 play. But this is another 2-drop backup that Ice, I think, is very much happy to see. Put it in the break zone, choose a doll 4, deal it 4,000 damage. So the other consideration here is if you want to do, say, Ice Lightning, and you're capitalizing on some of the either ping effects to do extra damage, maybe you're in Fire and Ice, that you're using some of your AVV and then you break this to finish something else off. There's a lot of different combinations that this opens up for Ice. And again, we come into the argument of, you know, which 2-drops do you end up picking, because you're so limited when you go into dual color. But I think in monocolored Ice, this is a very welcomed backup from what we've had previously.
Honestly, for me, this backup doesn't do a lot for me either. I really like the little blue tie, but to be serious with this, this is a card that you want Ice Lightning. This is kind of giving you the opposite of what you have for Cid. This allows you your combo plays with things like Angeal or the Black Mage that breaks the damage backup. I mean, I don't think at the end of the day I'm really looking to sacrifice one of my lands to trade up on like an unpoppable attack that I've made that someone blocked into. I mean, I think I get the short end of the stick there. I mean, yes, it is a 2-drop land, but this is the 3rd 2-drop land, and we still have at least another one to come. Let's just put this on the back burner and appreciate that little blue tie.
It's interesting because if I stand corrected on this, but it is the same effect that we see for Fire, except you have to pay 1 extra, but it can be an active or dulled forward. So there's kind of this play that you have to pick between those 2 backups ultimately. So again, very interested to see what kind of direction this goes into for those different decks. Oh look, and another one. 2-drop Sage. Put Sage in the break zone, choose up 2 forwards opponent controls, and freeze them. Ice loves freezing stuff. This is probably ultimately my, and I could just be overhyping it, but my favorite 2-drop. Maybe not out of the entire set, but this is one of the ones that absolutely piqued my interest very early on. And you know, not that I've gone over the full set list with a fine-tooth comb by any means, but I saw this, realized what Ice wants to be doing, and this absolutely gets my love, because it's just always a threat that your opponent has to consider once you play it early, and it's obviously common, so you can play multiple of them as well. Where do you rate it, Max?
This is definitely the best Ice 2-drop in this set as a standard unit. I mean, it's very evident, as Square Enix also agrees. If you look closely at the art, you can see the award he already won for becoming the best 2-drop backup in Opus IV. He displays it proudly there. But literally, this card is not mono to limited. This card can go into anything else. It's going to play Ice reasonably, and it has one of the strongest effects. Like, when that card out, you actually have to take that into consideration when playing there. You can't fall into that. Like, anything that you kind of get stumbled back upon with that is something you've knowingly put yourself into. So it offers a great level of consideration for all plays. This card is actually viable. It's very good.
So do you think this means that we'll see a rise in Archer coming out of the Windex, which have kind of been a kind of hit or miss previously, but you know, they have tools like Oracle in a pinch, but I see this being a type of card that, you know, among with some other backups that's certainly going to be seen playing this next set, that I think Archer might finally be an established staple of Windex, where it was kind of either a 2 of or a 0 of hit or miss kind of thing.
I mean, I've always been pro Archer. Archer gives you options, and Archer can remove things that are problematic, that are overlooked cards that are easily like the best Stonewalls in this format. I don't think Archer. I don't know that I want to Archer this thing in particular. I still like some of the 3-drop options we have, but it's. I think obviously as time goes on, Archer's value increases. So to agree with you, yeah, Archer's place is coming.
Oh, and here's the 4-drop I was thinking about. Oh yeah, it's spell and freeze. So 4 drops are always kind of an interesting spot because you're either playing it early in the case of Devout where you can get some utility back, so it's only a 2-drop and it feels good, or you have to have 2 backups out already. Maybe you're just cutting 1 to get it done. But this is another one of those things where if you either build your deck in a certain way, or if the field just presents itself in a very favorable way for you, they just name 3 or something, it's an absolutely absurd effect. So yes, the danger here is that it says all forwards, so you can't hit your own guys, but you can always just kind of play around that. I haven't had the chance to brew yet what ice would look like. In mono ice, this absolutely is going to get a play for me most likely. In dual colors, I'm not certain. And again, that could just be a total miss on my end, but haven't had the chance to look at all the 4 and 5 drops yet, or 7 drops in some case for backups now.
This card is very interesting. I'm in a very small minority here, but last set when I saw the Ice Cannoneer backup that costs 5, I almost lost my mind. Obviously, Cannoneer costs 5, so there's a little bit of difference here. This one has some of the biggest potential here. This is a card where you get the most advantage out of it based on how you play and how you set up a play for it. It's very good, but because it does cost 4 and it is a land, you're going to put yourself, a backup rather, you got to put yourself into a situation where you're playing more backups and you're using this as a backup to create utility, so it's kind of hedging into your summons positions. However, even beyond that, it's the fact that you're still constricted to 5 spots. There might be something for this, but like it is, you have to really work for this one. But I mean, if you do, it's rewarding.
The new Shiva, which so this is a card that I saw and I absolutely lost my mind. The Opus IV Shiva is obviously going to continue to see play. This one only gets better when you have extra Shivas, you know, dealing 6,000. It's very reasonable that this card's going to do 8 or 9. And again, in a deck previously where we've seen these mono ice decks, they really struggle with kind of dealing with these bigger forwards, or they sometimes just have to play the Prey Vein gets the job done kind of thing. Anytime I'm seeing these damage-based effects, especially when it's A, so cheap, and B, it's an EX burst, I am absolutely excited. Again, the downside here is that for those dual element decks where you open up multiple summons, it might be hard to fit 6, 7, 8 Shivas in the deck and not, like, why aren't you playing... You know, why aren't you playing Odins? Why aren't you playing Ifrits? Why aren't you playing all these other great options as well? But in Mono Ice, I think this is a very much welcomed summon in the right type of deck. And if you want to go completely crazy, you can do the 9 Shiva build with Snow, which is probably something I'll end up trying just because. But maybe I'm a little bit greedy, but I want to try that.
I'm probably the only human alive who's incredibly underimpressed with this card. I really don't want to be in a position ever where I'm forcing myself to play 9 cards to make this viable. I don't ever want to be in a position where, even though I will get an EX burst out of my Shivas, I don't want them to be in the break zone. This card is like on a base level turn 1, turn 2, a bad Ifrit from Opus 2, because you are delimited to a dull forward. It has a very big growth potential depending on how many more Shivas they make down the line. I think it's a really great tool for mono ice. It's just very apparent and obvious that they cannot give ice everything. Ice cannot have a very streamlined amount of direct damage. You can definitely make something with this, but I mean, again, it's just going to be, you obviously want to draw a late game. If you got 9 Shivas, who knows which one you're going to draw. And I don't ever want to draw a Shiva cycle.
No. Yeah, so again, I think we can agree that there's probably a case for it in mono ice, but once you start opening up to those 2 element decks, or 3, 4, what have you, it very quickly gets outclassed. Cid World Final Fantasy, yay! This is one that we've talked about quite a bit already in our preview that we got, but for those that might have missed it, you get to put a monster of cost 2 or less from your break zone into play. again, this gets to the point where now we're back talking to, we've seen a lot of 2-drop backups in Ice, and this is ultimately going to come down to which monsters you're going to be playing. Again, 2 or less here really does limit it. I really do like the idea of being cute, and maybe you're going to get multiple goblin activations or something like that in a turn, but unless I missed a monster, I don't think that this is going to be something that you're like, oh, I absolutely have to play this card, I have to play these monsters, and I'm going to put this in an Ice deck. So Max, maybe you can keep me in check there with if I've missed any kind of super good 2-cost or less monsters in this set, but I know we've talked outside of this, and the ones that I'm excited about are costing of 3.
Most of the best monsters are 2. I mean, there's obviously the outliners that are 3 or higher, but like on a widespread, like there's a lot of good value on the 2s. So you can see use in this, but again, it's an Ice monster, and the other good monsters don't fit into Ice. And do you really want to play 10 cards just to play Cid?
Probably
but
not.
This card is really good going forward. It's got the potential. Just got to get some pool.
And that's the thing. I think a thing that we too have talked about in previous kind of first looks or set reviews, whatever you want to call these. That there's these cards that's like, all right, this is going to be great at some point down the road. It's okay right now. You can probably make it work if you really want to, but we have to remind ourselves that as more sets come out, as more monsters come out, more Shivas come out, whatever it might be, more black mages and red mages, that they can only go up from there. So hopefully Cid will see. It's an adorable card, let's be honest. I'm hoping that this card does find its place eventually. And then we have Cid Randell. Max, do you want to start with this one?
Premium content advisory. Please upgrade your subscription to Magnet Gold to have unlock full review.
Stop it.
This might be the best Ice card of this set, and I'm not over talking here. This card is pretty ridiculous. You do have to work with it. However, this card by itself kind of added a lot of dimensions to a lot of things, because it actually gives Ice more than an annoyance effect. It actually makes Ice something like, oh, I actually have to deal with things. Because in this game, because we don't have unlimited backups, and we often don't have a very well-developed backup situation early on in the game, we have to hemorrhage cards from our hand, and we all know that cards from the hand is how we win these games. So Cid was a judge. He was one of the hardest units to get in that game, and he does got a ugly little mustache, so I mean, it's very clear that that's why he is going to get you to pay more.
Yeah, I absolutely love the pay effect. That's kind of what I was hinting at earlier, with either they're going to pay 1 or maybe have other effects that make them come to feel dull anyways. Lets you probably get some cheap points of damage in with more aggressive builds if you want to go that way, or just kind of a slower control build. I think Cid is definitely going to be a card a lot of people are going to be frustrated with in the new set. And if we just think about how our previous turns leading up to this format have progressed, where you're playing these things very well on curve and everything's going great, where now suddenly you have to think about paying that 1 extra for every single forward you want to play thereafter, it's going to be rough. And you know, outside of that, yeah, sure, it might just be a 4-drop 8K, 4-drop 9K if they have the backup, but and then obviously up to 10 if you have everything for it. But it creates a very interesting dynamic that we haven't seen in Final Fantasy yet. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this one ultimately plays out. But I agree that it's going to be seeing a lot of play. Speaking more about Category 6 and searching, Max, do you want to talk about Setzer as well?
Yes. First and foremost, Steiner is a better card because Steiner has the X burst. Granted, there is a wonderful dichotomy between these two cards because Setzer has incredible value, both being played and its resolution from leaving the field. Setzer is not a bad card by any means. I don't know that I want to play it as an additional searcher, but again, it's just more like type things to kind of dissuade anyone from wanting to block or to knock out and break any characters here, because you're going to dull something, you're going to freeze something. If I just play it, I'm going to search something. He does cost 5 though, and he is kind of understated, but even with whatever the Ice Lord is, the +1K, that tactics character, I can't remember which, because it's the stupid 4. He is an 8K, which isn't the worst. It's just he definitely is worth his cost and does his thing. It's just that he is not like, there's not value here. He's just he met the quota.
Well, I like it if we break it down to its parts, and now this might be the absolute, you know, kind of live the dream for this card for the effects that you're getting. So it gives you the ability to have a search. So you get a card back to your hand, in theory that makes it a 3 cost, and then has the ability that when it goes from the field to the break zone, you get to dull and freeze something like 3 cost Shiva. So in this perfect world, you're getting this value in the sense that you get to search for a guy, you get the +2 crystal points there. You're going to get to Shiva something for 3 for the initial cost paid off of it, and then hopefully you're trading with it, so you're killing one of their guys as well. So I see this as if you get to live the dream and, you know, pull all of this off and get to trade with one of your opponents forwards, you're probably going to feel great about it. I would dare say that it's a gamble, and yes, it's a terrible pun, but I think this is something that, with how many special effects that we've seen for Final Fantasy VI characters that you're going to want to be using, or I should say forwards that you're going to want to be using, I think the extra tutor makes sense. But again, it's one of those things where you really want to have, I mean, Steiner kind of had the same issue where it's like you want to have 3 backups ultimately before playing this card. And with Ice, now that we have more 2-drops, maybe it's easier, but Ice has struggled with that previously and getting those backups out there in a more aggressive manner. And then we have 2-drop Serah, which has just a lot of different options that it's going to be opening up for more these 2-drops, again, being aggressive. Enters the field, choose a forward opponent controls. If you have a category 13 forward other than Serah, dull and freeze it. So yes, it probably would have been too good if they would have just said character instead of forward, because of tutoring it and all that good stuff, obviously. But what I do like is you have this now Snow and Serah combo that can go on, and maybe rightfully so. But then when she attacks, you may also pay 2 ice. If you do so, opponent discards 1 card. So you're still getting that discard effect as well. So will we see a deck that we, again, if you're trying to focus on this more mono ice deck, and you can play Snow, you can play Serah, you can maximize on the Shivas, you can get those other discard effects, you're probably fine with it there. But I wonder how much that this will see play outside of having that dedicated category 13. With 5,000 stats, it's probably going to die very quickly, but maybe you do discard one card from your opponent's hand, which would be the positive side here, so you can play into, again, this kind of taxation strategy and what Ice has gained in this next set. Do you think this card will find a deck in this next set, Max, or is it kind of one of those wait and see cards?
This is a very interesting opinion for me, because I all but hate every 2-drop that's ever been made. I mean, there are rare exceptions like maybe Starter, but Serah has a great effect and has more beyond being played. I don't think Serah belongs on a mono ice deck or even much of an ice deck to begin with, but she definitely has a spot in some decks that do quirky things, and you definitely get some value out of it. I really think like the how do I want to say this? The icing on the cake is at any point that she dies. At any point where someone has to expend to check that, I mean, if you're playing that card and it's just getting blocked, or you're attacking and you're blocking with it, you're not quite using it correctly, so that's not like really what an icing value would be for it being killed. But somehow dealing at 5,000 damage outside of like a normal attack and a block, whatever, I'm great with that. I came in, it froze something, maybe I should discard a card. Really don't care. I mean, it is got decent art. I'm kind of upset people are trying to sell it for so high, because I want some foil ones for my tokens binder, but like, I'll wait for the market to get settled. All y'all trying to screw me over on some foils, not having it. Yeah. Justin.
More Final Fantasy VI forwards. So I'm gonna let you talk about Celes as well.
While we were talking about Serah, I was trying to think of my analogy I wanted for Celes, but I did not get it. Celes is in my top 5 for the set, for Ice at least. She's just good. I mean, she has conditions to her effects, but you're going to have them. You're going to be playing a 6 package with this card. It does very, very simple things for what you want. It's perfectly statted for a 4-drop. It has a special effect that's actually pretty good, and it has no like waiting period for that. I mean, you could just play Celes and have another one, and you're ready to go for that. The biggest thing about this, again, is that you need something else for it, so it's not a standalone effect. But, I mean, really, you're just going to play that 6 package already. I mean, she'll just do it when she'll come out. I mean, so you can obviously make some kind of weird, strange deck where you just want to play a 4-drop Frieza something, but you know, she needs her friends. She definitely needs her friends.
Yeah, I absolutely love the special effect because now we have the summoner backup that can cancel summons. She can cancel summons, and it can really just make your opponent's life hell. And especially
obviously you combo this with a little blue bow tie black mage, and you just get that 8,000 damage with all 4. Got
him. But yeah, there's, I mean, really both. Ice both of the legends. I don't think anyone's going to argue. They will absolutely see play, and that we don't really need to spend any more time on Celes. I think you really hit all the points on it. And then we have Rogue. When Rogue deals damage to a forward, dull it, and freeze it. And it is a standard unit. So I have to admit, and I put it on a later screen here, but I am excited for standard units and all the variations that we've got in this set. I think that, you know, when you get to a point where if you're playing Warrior Light or you're playing these buff effects, maybe the deals a damage part isn't relevant. Maybe you're just going to end up killing it anyways, but I like what this card is potentially doing in those decks. And I mean, shout out to Golbez while we're at it as well, for being probably a decent enough option so you can be aggressive with it. They have to block it, and it can maybe free something else in your future, free something else up to attack in your future turn. So very interested to see if this makes an appearance outside of kind of those two themes, or at least where I'd place it initially. Max, is there any kind of, you know, larger archetypes I might be missing with this card?
No, you basically hit it. I'm trying to limit my comments from being overtly pessimistic, but this card does not excite me. I mean, there is the obvious, wonderful standard unit deck of water-ice combination.
Yeah.
Actually got some things this set, but this card doesn't do anything relevant, and I don't want it to be in a sleeve. It should not be sleeved. Do not spend a nickel on it. It's just, I mean, when you're doing your deck right with standard units, you should already be impressively ahead. You're not trying to claw from behind by getting tempo from this thing. This is a card that did something and had another effect, and then it's still here. Like, and also it's statted so low that even with all the impressive buffs, it's like still got a chance to be blown out. But that's again why it has the revenge effect of freezing and dulling. But Lord Minwu will not have it.
That is very true. And then I put on the next one. So then we have 4-drop Knight standard unit, and I made the note there for the first class guy. So Ice standard unit forwards, you control gain plus 2,000 power. So yes, there you go. They can get buffs that way. Maybe you're playing Warrior Light 2, as we mentioned. There is this water ice standard units deck. Who knows how good it is in the next set? And not that you're playing Knight. It was just the only redeeming factor about Knight is that it's a 4-drop AK standard unit in ice, where they were lacking previously, outside of obviously this one. So yay to that.
All right. So kind of as I've said at this point now, I'm a very big picture person, so I'm going to just preface what I'm about to say as this is incredibly big picture. This is a Knight, and this card has no text. This is the best token they've ever made. I bought 15 of the Opus IV Knights, and I don't regret it at all. They're going to be tokens for other games because they're Knights. Just, you got to think about it if you play other games.
That's fair.
This gives me the counterpart depending on like what mood I'm in or what kind of crowds I'm trying to impress. You know, maybe have 6 of each, show them. It's good. As for playing in this game, don't think I want to be at a 10k first strike with vanilla. Just, I mean, that's not a bad thing at all, but it's a vanilla. I would probably sleeve this card before Rogue. That's very strange to say, but that's just what it is. It's at least a 4-drop 8k.
I can agree with that. And then finally we have another monster for Ice, Swampmonk, which is just very interesting artwork, to say the least. So until end turn, becomes a 4 with 5,000 power, and when Swampmonk attacks, choose one forward or monster and dull it. You can only use this ability once per turn. Interesting here for monsters that it can dull, so that's always going to be kind of what is your opponent playing and how much value does it have, because some monsters just don't care. You just sacrifice them. So I put into the break zone for their effect. But I like the option that can, you know, dull something down. You can get it back with Cid. That's kind of like the pro there. But I'm curious again, how much room do we ultimately have for monsters when you go outside the element of just mono ice?
I like want this card to be good. It's not. It's nice, but the big issue I have with it, even though it does cost 2, is you play it, it's on your field, but it's not really there. You can't. You have to like overinvest chump block with it if you need to. It doesn't have any evasion of sorts other than it's just an aggressive thing. I absolutely abhor snow 1-drop, and this is just worse snow that almost has protection because it's not always a horde, but I don't know. Like it's not where I want to be with an aggressive deck, because especially I have to pay ice to activate it. If anything with any of this hyper aggressive decks you play, you are not majority ice.
So the one you brought up the point, so kind of the one positive that we can give it to then is that it does get around Shantoto, because obviously it'll just be a monster on your side when they play it. Yeah, so they Tama it in or something. I get it, but you know, in the normal realm of what's going to happen, this should stay on your field. So
I'm pretty sure I can't bring myself to Tama and the Shantoto to get rid of that thing. I mean, even if they have 5, you know, it's just I'm not acknowledging that as a card.
Moving on to Babus. When a forward opponent control attacks, choose one forward opponent controls. But if your opponent doesn't pay 1, freeze it. So when they attack, you choose one of their forwards, you can potentially freeze it. So I know how much you hate 2-drops, so I'll let you have your moment there. But I think this card's insane, and I could just be totally wrong, because this is kind of a card that just screams, you know, remove it. But it's a 2-drop, it's a low investment on your end, and if it's a 5,000, you know, you can't Cyclops it. Maybe they have to break it back up with Lulu to remove it. Maybe you have this plus 1,000 backup, which gets even better. But I think the potential for this card to just be annoying as hell, basically, for your opponent is insane. So this is a card that I will be very much looking forward to brewing with, and plus he was just an awesome guy in Tactics. But how much play we'll ultimately see, I'm not sure. But absolutely, this is on my radar for future decks, whatever those color combinations might be.
This card is utterly ridiculous. I do hate 2-drops, but this is like the perfect kind of 2-drop because it's not there to be aggressive. And when you finally do create a situation with it, you just get free value off it by attacking. You're not really trying to block with it. It's literally just there. You can almost think of it as like an existence that's there. I mean, obviously they can interact with it with Odin and Shantoto and things like that, but at the same time, that's what they're removing. I mean, not everyone has infinite sources of removal. Like, I guess I'm okay, except for in the lightning deck that's cycling Lulus and Fusoyas, that's actually cycling it out that way. But at that point, you're getting value off this card. And this card has so many applications of this thing. It's like literally one of the best and most playable cards in Ice in this set. This is literally the top 5 cards in this set. This card's silly.
It's also common, which is interesting.
I'm not having these circus animals. I already built a circus animal deck. It's stupid. I don't want nothing to do with it.
And then we have Flan, which I'll let you have this one. Be my guest.
I've read this card multiple times, but I'm reading it again for the first time. Card named Flan. Man, I hate theater rhythm art. At least you can like, I don't know, like rack them. This is the kind of card you want when you're playing a Kafka monster deck, because you just want little cheap things and you can just put out there. But again, when you have a 5-card hand and you just start putting out 1 and 2 cost monsters that you're not directly inhibiting and interacting with your board, you're just getting attacked. So I just hope you're not dead. And at that same time, when you do that, even though you have haste, you can paying 1 mana and putting that in play, or even worse than that, discarding a card to put that card in play to make them discard a card is worth it. Yeah. That's awful. I don't know. Like I'm going more evil here and more harsh than I was for the 2-drop Bard, but it's the same thing. I really don't want a Bard ever. I don't want to do this ever. It's just I just want a monster there, and I also wanted to do something. I want to turn it into something relevant. This is definitely some kind of limited card that I'm still begrudgingly playing.
Yeah, to your point, I think it's nice that it can thin out your deck in Ice, which previously didn't have a lot of tutors. Certainly it has more now, or ways to search your deck. But again, if you're in the heavy discard theme, probably. So it's a buff in that direction, but that's it. Like, that's probably the only place that you want this, because it's just, there's so many other options that you could do. So maybe discard is just the new best thing, and we'll see. But I'm not that excited over it. And then, speaking about searches, we have Mewt. Pretty straightforward again. It's an EX burst. Searches for Cid, which again is insane. So I'm probably playing this just so I can find Cid more often. And then it also searches up Remedi, which is ice or wind, if I remember correctly. So maybe we do ice wind there as well. But
he gets Remedi the ice 3-drop.
So I'm pretty excited for this. Do you think it'll have a home?
I absolutely do. I mean, I will go on the record and say that Mewt was an insufferable character despite having a tragic story. His card is very good. This whole little package, like the little band, the circus animals, they're all ridiculous. This card belongs in Ice in whatever package you're playing with Cid and Remedi, because you're just going to play them both. And this card has the EX burst on top of being a backup that searches. It's really good. This is akin to Steiner-esque levels. It's just not getting an entire category.
Right. Then we have Mecha Chocobo, which is a card of the day from Square Enix a bit ago. Clearly need to update the card image that we have from this. Cannot be chosen by summons. When it attacks, choose one dull forward of cost 4 or less. Opponent controls break it. And when Chocobo is blocked, break it. So it's, if we can clear the way for it, it's definitely potentially insane. I do like that it's a World of Final Fantasy character. That is a 4-drop, which is very rough now in Ice with the number of other 4-drops that we have gained. So props to the fact that it has a Moogle on the chest. So I will give it that. And again, I really love the fact that they can't Odin this away, so they have to find other ways to interact with it. But just being able to get that first attack of Declaration, and yes, it has to be dull, but you're in Ice. You can find a way around that, and it's basically Odin on a body. So this is another card that I'm extremely excited to brew with, maybe trying to find what the right choices are for it. Kind of my gut reaction would be more of an Ice Lightning when you're already playing all these effects that can clear the way. But being a 7K is a little bit concerning because of things like, the Brynhildr, Edgar can help do ping effects. Vivi's obviously going to want to hit it. Like, all the abilities still interact with this card. Fusoya, if it sees play. So it's... I wish it had that magical 8K number that we've seen previously, but ultimately I think it's going to be fine, and I'm curious to see if this can find room in the Ice Lightning. Again, that's probably just the first place that I would go with it.
Okay, so work with me here. I want all of you to think of this for a minute if you've ever seen or received one of these. I don't know if you've ever seen the little puzzles that have money in the middle. They're kind of like little ball mazes sometimes they're rings, but basically you complete the maze, you do the puzzle, and you get rewarded at the end with the prize. This card is like a living card game personification of that. This card has a great little reward when you work with it. However, you have to actually work with it, and it's not hard. There's great things you can do with it. There's just lots of applications you can do to combo with this card, and you get a decent effect from it. It's just that you have to do it right. If you're just playing this an aggro deck, you're just going to cast it, you're just going to attack and break something and have them block and break it. You're not doing it right. You're not doing this card justice. And if you have a foil one, just give it to me. Really just consider, though, Googling those things because they make great stocking stuffers. You might want to just give someone that, maybe put a $5 bill in, put a 20 on top, and put a bunch of ones. They can get real excited. Christmas is coming. Just, keep them on their toes.
I appreciate the distance that you went with that. I absolutely do. So if you had to put this with a element combination, kind of where would you start with to get people some brewing ideas?
Fire 7.
All right. Then we're going to get spoopy for a minute with Lich. Deal each forward opponent controls damage equal to half of its power. So a summon version of the Genesis Avatar, I believe was the name of the card, that basically did the same thing. I mean, if you have 2 somehow, great. But the short of it, I'm not that excited for this card. Max, maybe you can convince me otherwise.
I can't. I got a decent amount of foils at the Opus IV pre-release. Somehow I ended up with one of these, and this is the only foil I just set aside. I was like, I'm going to get rid of this. This card's fine. I mean, you, again, have to work for it, and it's not worth the level of work. When you think of your deck and you're making your shell, your summon slot is very constricted and is very tight, and you really don't have a lot of spaces for this, and I really hope that other than because of a card pool reason, you're not reaching for this. It's not to say this card is not usable or powerful or anything like that. It's just that it's just underwhelming compared to everything else. Granted, it's still better than Shiva Cycle.
All right. Oh yeah, Remedi. I was thinking of the other card. So another case where and again, this goes into I saw all these cards. I'm like, okay, there's this entire tax theme built into the Final Fantasy Tactics Advanced characters, so why not? So if you control Cid, gains 1,000 power. So 3-drop 8k, sure, sign me up in ice. That's something that's been very hard to come by previously. When your opponent plays a character onto the field, other than from his or her hand, if your opponent doesn't pay to break it. So obviously, Golbez is the number one thing people are going to think about, which is fair. And then it has an interesting application in the Ice Mirror if you're both running the 3 Devouts, which you're probably still going to be running. So I'm very curious to see where this comes into play. I think that because the other cards you're going to be running, it's fine to include in your deck. But I wonder how many other decks will have those kind of cheat into play effects or come from the break zone types of effects where your opponent is going to be paying 2. So I guess the question at the end of the day around this card is, in an average match, is your opponent going to pay 2, or is there an effect that's going to cause them to pay 2? And if not, how good is just a 3-drop 8k? Because you're obviously going to be playing Cid. What do you think, Max?
This card's very good. This card didn't quite make my top 5 for Ice, but I mean, it's a strong 6. The biggest issue with this, well, not even an issue, the biggest consideration of this card is going to be, as the meta goes, are you playing 2 or are you playing 3 of this copy in your deck that's working with FFTA? You have nothing but an upside for her effect. She's perfectly statted for her thing. I really don't care if you're not, at best, you might create a scenario where you're playing someone who's not going to have things that cheat things into play, so you're looking to trade with a 4-drop for no reason. That's perfectly fine. I mean, just having Lord Duke Dard, who gives you plus 1k, and Cid, you got a 9k for 3. That's fine. That's great. Plus, she has more text. That's wonderful. It's just, again, when we get to a weird format where no one's playing things like Yang and Ursula, stuff like that, then we cut it down to 2 because at the end of the day, it's we don't need a vanilla 3-drop 9k. We want cards that do stuff. But she's definitely playable. She's incredibly playable.
And then we have Locke, which is the other legend from Ice for the set. Another Final Fantasy VI character. So, Max, again, do you want to start us off with Locke?
Absolutely. This man here, stealing hearts and working in plays. This is definitely one of the best Ice cards. I mean, it's kind of obvious they kind of tilt the hands towards these legends for the most part in each set. Again, this is definitely what I kind of began to talk about at the beginning of this whole experience, is that this is when you need the Team 6 going on here. You got a tutor for him. He's a 3/7, perfect. He has a wonderful special effect. He's going to make them discard cards. He can even continue to do so. It feels a little bit better than Genesis in that regard. Like, to me, I love Genesis. I don't look at Genesis as a card I'm trying to rip cards in my opponent's hand. Anytime I get that, it's icing and it's sweet. But, like, Locke, looking at Locke, I'm playing Locke to try and get cards out of their hand, and I'm trying to fish for cards or make them deal with Locke on the spot. And even close out games with unblockable. Locke does a lot of things that Ice wants, because Ice's biggest problem, at least in the last couple sets, is it created stagnant board states, and it had really hard times pushing out. That's why you saw a lot of Ice variants that could do things past turn 7 that other decks could not, but were at their most vulnerable before that. Because obviously, as soon as you just start kind of like shore up and you have all your Earth set up out, and you kind of slowly take over the game. This thing will allow you to not play Earth and still have a reasonable time span to a game and try to close it out. He's a great card.
Yeah, this, again, perfect stats. The special is just absolutely absurd. The fact that he connects, he does even more good stuff. Like, this is all around just an amazing card. And sure, he has the drawback, if you will, that it has to have two or more, I guess in this case, category 6 characters on the field for the effect. But in this deck, I mean, and I probably should have just looked at how many Final Fantasy 6 characters that we've got out of this next set, but it's a ton, regardless of what element combination that you're going to be running. Again, Fire Ice, just low key, what probably I'm going to start with. But I think 6 is absolutely something people should look into. This is a card that get your foils of early if you can. I know Max is probably looking for them, so give them to Max first, then get your set. But card's nuts. Max out of Max should play absolutely. So with that, we have kind of our last pick at the end. Kind of what is your card you're most excited for? And it was too easy to pick the legendaries, so I wanted to pick a card that was not a legendary and is in fact a rare. So I went with Cid Randell for my pick, and actually our son Basin picked this card, and I completely agree with him. So Max, what is kind of your key card that you're looking forward to out of Ice if you had to pick one?
I wasn't expecting this. Kind of put me on the spot here. Honestly, I got a very strong 3-way tie, but I mean, it's either Banana Cid or Babus. It's definitely between those two. Banana Cid opens untold doors. It's just ridiculous. Babus has literally the most effect on the game right now. It's the most playability factor. I think we're going to see a lot of Babus decks. I mean, depending on the events we get and where things go from there. But if everyone uses him right, that little thing is going to be annoying.
Hey, I mean, if we're playing in a Babus meta, that just makes the 2-drop Shiva better, right? Because you can kill Babus with it. So I'm reaching with a little bit with that one. I get it, but something. Oh man, I wish
downgraded. ModNet Premium no longer available.
It just makes me wish those weird cases where and not that Shiva would be any means by an immediate sideboard card, but there's certainly certain things where I wish you could have more options to build with instead of just the 50-card deck. So this ran super long, I'm sure, and Max, thank you for hanging out with me to talk about our Ice cards, and thank you everyone who's stuck with us through this entire time. So if you like the video, guys, make sure to drop us a like. That helps out a ton. Comment down below what your favorite Ice card is from Opus 4. And last but not least, please do not forget to subscribe for future Final Fantasy trading card game content. So Max, do you have any kind of closing comments you'd like to add before we kick it off?
Oh, you know I do. I've got 3 things I want to say, and I expect them to be followed. I want to see at least 10 YouTube comments that say foils, and possibly 1 or 2 that says Max. If you really did like this, please leave a YouTube comment about it. I mean, if anyone's been paying attention to the official FFTCG Facebook group, I said I was going to be trying to do content. This is going to show you what it's going to be like. You'll expect to see a lot more of me with Matt doing cool things like this. Thanks for taking the time to listen. Even though I'm a ridiculous person, I did put a lot of effort in telling everyone forward facts and not obscuring or hiding anything. I was very, very candid on everything. So thank you all.
Yep, I definitely appreciate that. So on behalf of the rest of Six Sages Gaming, Max and all people, have a good one. And this video made possible thanks to the Patreon support of viewers such as yourself. Thank you to our honorary sages.